Hey, Carol, can you hear me? I was just.
Yes, I can hear you.
Hold on.
Sorry,
I was just curious. Do you have a way of knowing how many people are actually participating remotely? Is there some measurement device?
Yes, we have a count that's running at the top of our screen. So right now we only have 7 people signed in, but it's still 5 minutes before it starts. So.
Okay.
All right. For those who have joined us this morning, we'll begin our presentation shortly. It should begin right around 9 o'clock, which is about 4 minutes out. If you'll just hang on with us, we'll start then. Thanks.
Good morning to all. I'm going to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the 2021 Broadhead Association's annual meeting. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us virtually. This is a new experience for many of us, but in today's crazy world of COVID, we probably are familiar with this type meeting by now. But again, thank you for joining us. We have a lot of information to pass to you today, and we hope it'll be very meaningful, answer a lot of your questions, and help you get involved or continue to be involved with who we are, where we are, and what we stand for. We'd like to especially welcome new members that have joined us over the past year. And there will be a video and a PDF of our presentation today that will be available on the website shortly after we complete the presentations today. The Broadhead Association Board. I'm waiting on a slide, please. Your board consists of myself, John Fisher, as president, Alan Briggs is the vice president, Robert Drumheller serves as secretary and treasurer, Tiffany Williams and John Kinney make up the rest of the board. And we do have one vacancy on the board. We'll discuss that a little bit later. Thank you. The board vacancy, Nana Smith offered her resignation to the board. It was logistically a nightmare for her to try to make the island, make the meetings, and feel that she was pertinently involved with our meetings, living in Austin, Texas, and trying to get back and forth to the island in a timely fashion and manner, and be involved to the extent she'd like to be. We will certainly miss Nana. She brought a lot of insight, information, and knowledge to the board, and that is a vacancy that has a 2-year remaining term. The board will be asking for anyone that might be interested in self-nominating or nominating a qualified person that would fit with our board through the homeowners or other person you have talked to, and just make sure that if you nominate or get that to us, we would encourage that you've talked to the individual, or if it's yourself, that you're willing to serve and available for it. We will be accepting email resumes to the chair of the nominating committee, and that's Tiffany Williams. Her email address is on there. So if you're interested in serving or know someone that's willing to serve, get those resumes into us by February the 3rd, and the board will be seeking the advice from the nominating committee to recommend a replacement for the next 2 years for Nana. Okay. Next slide, please. Our Broadhead Island staff consists of the following individuals. Carrie Moffitt is our executive director. She's been with us several years now, doing a great job. Administrative assistant is Diane Maceras. Most of you know Diane. She's been here and is a staple for us. She is the person who can direct you to anyone you need to as far as administrative work assistance or direction. She can get you to that person. And Fran Pagliaro has joined us as the ARC coordinator. She will be replacing Karen Mosteller, who is seeking her retirement again for good cause. She's served us in many, many years, and she's going to stay on with us for a brief time as the ARC specialist, helping Fran get her feet on the ground and making good decisions about moving forward. Carol Collins is the ARC Association Covenants Compliance Agent, and she is working with helping us oversee, look at, and manage the covenants as far as compliance issues on the island. Pam Rainey is our Customer Relations Associate and provides much of the communications that are sent out and is working behind the scenes. She has worked diligently to help get this presentation put together and all the information. Denise Idle is our full charge bookkeeper. Denise came with us several years ago and has done an excellent job in helping us get on our feet and take care of tracking exactly where every piece of reserve is for each community, each section that's out there, etc. So she's done a great job working with Robert and tracking our finances and getting them where they need to be so that they're fully accountable. And Pam Henson, sorry, Pam, Yeah, Pam Henson is our communications associate, and she is responsible for determining, looking at the island report, soliciting information, posting that, and researching, putting it out there, and maintaining the association's website, which is a great resource. Any and all things you're looking for with reference to the association, who we are, where we are, what we're doing at any given time, and references are posted there. And we encourage you to use that site, and it's picked up a lot of followers in the past couple of years. So we're proud of that, building that as a communication tool and keeping the transparency out there. Okay, next slide, please. I'm going to ask Robert to cover our proof of quorum, please. Robert Drumheller.
Robert, you're muted. If you'll unmute, please.
Okay, sorry. Thanks, John. So every year we go through this process of establishing what the quorum requirements are and letting you know what the results are. So please bear with me for a moment while I, in fact, just read this slide and then let you know what the outcome was. So for Article 3, Section 4 of the bylaws, at the annual meetings and all special meetings, the presence of 150 members entitled to cast or of proxies entitled to cast votes shall constitute a quorum for any action except as otherwise provided in the Articles of Incorporation, the Declaration, or these bylaws. All right, so what was the result? The result is that we currently have 106 proxies in hand representing 173 votes. So we've satisfied the quorum requirement. The proxies in hand represent 9% of membership participation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Robert. I will ask for an approval of the minutes from the 2020 annual meeting, which has been on the Baudette Association website for the members to review. Ask for a motion.
So moved. Second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Those in favor of approval of the minutes, please.
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Thank you. The minutes for the meeting have been approved for 2020. We also need to introduce today's candidates for the board that have been recommended. Each of you has been sent the annual report. That annual report has the biographies and information about the two candidates that have been recommended by the nominating committee. Robert Drumheller has been recommended, and you can see his information on your annual report. And also Alan Briggs has been nominated by the committee to serve. So if you'll check your annual reports, there's a good biography of each of them, though, represented there. And if you have questions about that or whatever, please go through that. As far as calling for the election, the annual meeting packet was mailed to members mid-December as required by the bylaws. The online proxy voting has been available through Wednesday of this past week. If you voted in this manner, your vote has already been counted, and we have that tallied. If you prefer to send a paper proxy, those votes have also been counted, and in either instance, you don't need to do anything further at this time. For those who may not have voted already, an online ballot is available this morning until 10 a.m. It will be cut off at 10 a.m. If you still have your annual meeting packet, go to the website. If you still, you can go to the website listed on the back page and enter the registration code listed. If you need to receive the web address and the registration code again, if you will email Diane Maceras, and that is diane@baudetteassociation.com right now, I think she will be able to immediately respond to you with information. You'll have until 10 a.m. to cast your vote. I would like to thank Diane and Lori Jelinek for serving as tellers for us this morning, and that committee will be tallying all the votes and giving us the results a little bit later today of the election. So at 10 a.m. we will close the election. Okay, thank you. If we look at the stats about Broadhead associations, properties, what do the members have? What's out there? We have a total of 1,898 properties. There are 1,149 rooftops, and there are 749 lots. 12 lots were converted to new homes in 2020. We know there's a lot of building going on for 2021, and we see that continuing. And we do have 6 lots that were donated to the Smith Island Land Trust in 2020. Okay, next slide, please. And articles of incorporation direct Broadhead Association to administer and enforce architectural review guidelines. I'm going to ask Tiffany Williams to explain this briefly. She's the liaison to the ARC.
Thank you, John. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Architectural Review Committee, the committee makes up the association's largest group of volunteers. The committee is comprised of property owners from very diverse backgrounds, and they devote a huge commitment of time to these meetings. Last year, we had about 50% more submittals than we did the year before, so it is a big commitment, and it's also a great opportunity to get involved. If we currently have 3 openings available. 1 spot on Section A and 2 spots on Section B. So if you're interested in serving, please send in your application. But like I said, it's a great opportunity to get involved in the island.
All right, I'll get this little button figured out. Thank you, Tiffany. And at this time, I'm going to call on John Kinney.
Okay. With regard to the other responsibilities of BHA, there are a large number of common areas that BHA manages. BHA manages all 3 of the Keeper's Landing, Surfman Walk, and Sumner's Crescent communities with regard, because it's a drip line community. We manage amenities or assets of 6 additional neighborhoods listed there. There are also 13 alleys that are located in the East End that BHA is responsible for maintaining, and those provide access to 125 individual properties. A large piece of what BHA does is managing tree trimming and removal requests on common areas, such as along the golf course. And of course, BHA helps protect the natural uniqueness of Broadhead Island through the management of tree and limb removal and understory removal. So just to give you an idea of the extent of the common areas that BHA is responsible for, you can see on the map here, the purple areas are common areas that are owned by BHA. And many of those are along golf courses. Some are just areas that are in between developed lots or undeveloped lots. Next slide. And this is just a close-up of the West End area. I would note that BHA has a ownership or partial ownership of many of the lagoons, and that is something not generally known, but we do have that, and we do have reserves associated with that. Next slide. On the East End, we also have a fair number of common areas. We, in particular, do not have the Whalehead Park or the Commons down there, just in case there are questions about that. Those are the responsibility of the village. But we do have the alleys as previously mentioned. So the point of all this is there's quite a bit of land that BHA is responsible for managing. And next slide. In addition, BHA provides recreational services and facilities. We have the Association Center, which in normal times is used quite a bit for a lot of different activities that many of which are scheduled by the SER committee of the BHA. Unfortunately, not a lot in 2020. We manage the improved common areas for property use. We lease common area to the village of Broadhead for the mulch site and for the dog park. And again, as I mentioned previously, we have a variety of social and recreational educational activities that are facilitated by the SER committee.
Okay, thank you, John.
Yep.
As far as, I'm sorry. Our next slide talks about communicating activities, decisions of interest to members, etc. As far as communicating news, what is happening, and other pertinent information, the island report is our main source of that, along with the Broadhead Association's website. Informational videos are often out there. We're sharing those, anything that's coming in as far as COVID-19, stay-at-home orders, etc. We're publishing, distributing 12 months of island reports each year, as well as including our annual report. And we certainly look for increased use of the Facebook followings, etc. Social media is a great thing as long as it's an open cause and used appropriately and properly, and we have the opportunity to communicate with each other appropriately. The Broadhead Association website, again, I can't encourage you enough to go to that site. It has just about anything and everything you want to know about what's happening, what's going on within your association and our activities. Next slide, please. Promote the health and safety and welfare of our members. We do attend island entity and off-island meetings to try and keep up with exactly what's going on. I know there are presentations today that will talk about things such as the Transportation Authority and so forth. I do want you to know and understand that we represent ourselves at the village council meetings. We also go to this type meeting, and we try to stay in tune with exactly what's going on so we can communicate that back and make that available on our website and our island reports, and so you have that as timely as is practical for us or for yourselves and us. We help the property owners navigate the ins and outs of property ownership on Baudette Island. Many of you have been here a good while. Some of you are new, and the Island Basics was created. It's a work in progress over the past year or so, and has been the first edition that's been published and put out, and it's intended to help as a welcome package for some of the basics about approvals, who we are, what we stand for, etc. So that is something that will be updated. I know there are people that say, well, wait a minute, this is not in there. Well, if it was not something that was available in the past recent, or that has come of age in the recent year, it may or may not be in there. But this is a piece that will be updated and provided. And it was created for informing property owners and visitors about the Baudette Island essentials. Okay, next slide, and I'm going to let Alan talk to you about this. Alan Briggs.
Thank you. And if you would go back to the next slide. Thank you. Thank you, John. One of the things we spend a fair amount of time doing, and we are obligated to do pursuant to the articles and the covenants, is to enforce the covenants. And the reason we do that is to help property owners, all of us, maintain the property values. The covenants are the specific obligations the covenants spell out for us to take care of our homes. Over the course of this last year, we had 29 community-wide standards violations. And unauthorized work done outside of the ARC, we had 19. We had 10 in clear cutting, mulching, over valuable barrier island understory, exterior lighting violations, we had 7. Trash and debris violations, we had 7. Others, we had 20. Each of those requires our covenants enforcement associate to observe, identify it, notify the property owner of work that needs to be done, establish a time frame for doing it. In the event it's not followed up, we need to stay on top of it. We notify the particular individual involved of the action that needs to be taken and whether or not it will require a hearing to go forward. Next slide.
Okay, thank you, Alan. At this point, I'm going to let Tiffany cover the ARC as the liaison for that, please. Tiffany.
Thank you. So Section A and Section B meet every month. And like I mentioned a little while ago, we have seen a lot more submittals this year or in 2020 than we saw the year before. Our meetings take place on Fridays, and if anyone is willing to serve, we are looking for volunteers. It does take a substantial time commitment, but it's definitely a great way to participate in the community and get a great feeling for what happens. And would definitely like to take a moment to say thank you to everyone who does serve on the ARC Section A and Section B committees, because it is a big time commitment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And as you can see, that is a large committee. It does need people that volunteer and come in and rotate on and off of that. And it is, as Tiffany has expressed, an excellent way to get yourself involved with the covenants, who we are, what we are, and protecting and maintaining what is valuable to all of us. Our next points are about the Finance Committee, and at this juncture, I'm going to turn this over to Robert. So, Robert, would you please cover Finance for us, please?
Okay, thank you, John. Hopefully I'm not on mute. So the Finance Committee consists of Mike Harriott, Brent Blackman, and myself. And I want to thank them for their service last year. And I also want to say that we would love to have some additional members participate in the committee. So if anybody out there in cyberspace is interested in applying, please don't hesitate to do so. We would love to have you and welcome your contribution. So some of the things we did last year, we worked with the staff to review the budget during the budget process. That actually goes on for several months in the autumn. We helped look at the draft audit prior to finalization. This year, because of the reserve study, which we'll talk about a little bit later in this presentation, the committee looked at some of the reserve study issues. And significantly, we spent a reasonable amount of time looking at the various neighborhoods that have supplemental dues. And in aggregate, across all of those neighborhoods, in 2021, their dues went down by $69,000. And some of that is the effect of one-time costs that went away. Some of it was looking at some reserve issues. And in some cases, we were actually able to take some surplus operating cash towards the end of the year and use it to satisfy reserve requirements in 2021, thereby reducing the supplemental dues for those particular neighborhoods in 2021. And then the last thing I wanted to mention is there's a program called Insured Cash Sweep, and we have 11 different bank accounts, and we have well over $1 million of cash at any one point in time in BHA. And so this program enables the bank that we work with to participate in a system where our money is spread out across a number of participating banks in the country. And the reason we do this is to make sure that we don't have more than $250,000 held at any one particular bank at any point in time, and that's related to the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation requirement. And so if you keep your money below the $250,000, the federal government provides you insurance in the hopefully unlikely event that one of these institutions goes into bankruptcy. And so we are in the process of, this has been approved by the board, and we're in the process of implementing it. Hopefully we'll get that done early this year. So John, am I turning it back to you?
Yes, we'll thank you, Robert, for that good information about the Finance Committee and the statistics there. What I'd like to do now is, next slide, please, the RCB, and John Kinney is going to cover that for us. So John Kinney, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. So this year being an unusual year, the RCB had one main activity, which was the reforest Operation Reforest We Forest. And we purchased and planted 154 trees throughout the island on BHA property. And we also, as a part of that, facilitated a bulk discount for property owners because of the dollar value of what we were purchasing. We got a 25% discount from the nursery, and so we were able to get those plants and trees for property owners at a significant discount. We planted memorial trees for retiring BHA board members, and one island-wide litter sweep campaign was conducted before COVID restrictions went in place. I'd like to recognize Kay Menk, who has served as chair now for at least 3 years and has done an excellent job getting resources from various entities on the island to help with the reforest activities. Next slide, please. So just a few pictures of the plantings and bringing the trees over on trucks on the barge. It was an interesting logistical challenge. I'd like to recognize Carol Collins of BHA staff, who via some contacts she had through family put us in touch with Verizon, who gave us a grant of $11,480 to help pay for the planting program. And we are endeavoring to use every bit of that. 25 trees were planted by property owners for mitigation requirements from the ARC. And then, as mentioned before, we have honor trees that were planted on behalf of homeowners who wanted to honor a special person to them. Most of what we planted were live oaks. As a matter of fact, we bought every single live oak that Tinga Nursery in Wilmington had on site. We would have bought another 5, but they didn't have any more. And 28 of those were honor trees. I mentioned the retired board members received honor trees, and 53 of those were planted on common areas. We also planted Yopen hollies, wax myrtles, American hollies, and there were 7 magnolias that were planted, and beautyberries and Carolina cherries. So that's Operation Reforest. Next slide, please. Nana was the liaison for the SCR committee, but I'll cover that briefly. Unfortunately, because of COVID restrictions, they were able to do very little this year. So the things that they normally would have done with potlucks, or we had the James Taylor event a couple of years ago, classes, etc., shag dancing, all of that was canceled, unfortunately. They did work on planning activities to start on when it is safe to gather. Again, unfortunately, Smith Island Social had to be postponed for 2021. That's normally a big event and a big draw. Betsy Stephen is the chair of the committee and has been on that committee previously, brings a lot of experience to it, and you can see the other members' names there. So, and I will hand back to Alan.
Strategic planning and long-range projects.
Alan, I think you are muted.
The Strategic Planning and Long Range Projects Committee is what we call the think tank for Broadhead Association. Joe Hawkins has been the chair for the last several years, and along with the members listed there, they have done a great job in really gathering, thinking, talking about, and kind of identify the big picture, where we're going and how we are going to get there. One of the highlights of this year was at the beginning of the year, Joe appeared in front of the board and gave us the presentation with regard to all of their conclusions and thoughts as to what needed to be done to improve Broadhead Island or Broadhead Association for the future. Okay, next slide, please. This is one of the recommendations from the committee, Joe Hawkins Committee, which I think of as the Long Range Planning Committee. And that is what has now, at least they identified, and they met with, talked with a number of the associations on the East Coast to see what the issues were, and particularly with regard to home maintenance from an exterior point of view. And one of the things that was clear was that with regard to aging houses, we are a 40-year-old community, and the question is, what do you need to do with aging houses? They lose their appearance faster, they require more maintenance at more frequent intervals to meet community standards. That negatively impacts surrounding property values. All of our properties go down in value if homes are not maintained. Next slide, please. Oh, on this slide, let me just identify the last, the statement that was very significant to us. And that is, Joe, in talking with Shannon White, the Director of Operations of Kiowa Island Community Association, had a phrase that really kind of described where we're at, and that is a 40-year-old island community that looks like a 40-year-old island community cannot be competitive. All right, next slide, please. What the Long Range Planning Committee concluded was properties that don't meet standards reduce overall property values, sort of the rotten apple philosophy. A core BHA responsibility is to enforce design guidelines and standards. We must do what we can to preserve property values. Unenforced standards allow lax owners to skip needed maintenance. Changing demographics may reinforce this attitude. We cannot afford to allow BHI to slip into a downward spiral to shabby. That was what the Joe's committee reported to the board. Next slide, please. The recommendation from the committee was we can no longer wait for owners to complain about their neighbor's house. It's no longer enough to maintain architectural standards. We should start a periodic property evaluation program. And let me emphasize, this is a program that was being recommended that where you evaluate from the exterior. People aren't going on the property to evaluate, but just seeing what does it look like when someone visits the island and takes a drive around the island. What do they see? Here, even a short drive through a neighborhood would allow us to identify properties in need of maintenance. And the conclusion and recommendation of the committee was every property should be evaluated at least once or twice a year. Next slide, please. And this now goes back to you, John.
Okay, thank you, Alan. I would like to recognize the committee members whose 3-year terms have expired or in one or two cases have resigned, but the Architectural Review Committee, the ARC, William Faber, Bill Faber has been with us a good while on that. His term is coming up. Kathy McConnell and Mike Harriet. The Resource Conservation and Beautification Committee, we have Betty Robinson and Barbara McQuaid. And we'd also like to recognize in the SER, Lou Earnhardt and Susan Panosis. And as far as the long-range planning, strategic planning, we have Craig Banderoff. So thank you very much to those. As you can see, again, another plea, an opportunity for you as individuals of our community to volunteer and be a part of who we are, what we are, and where we go. This slide talks about the volunteer opportunities, and you've heard us continue to pitch it through the entire board. Please take an opportunity to look at that sheet or find that volunteer form. It's available on the website, BaudetteAssociation.com. And we got a note that some people were not being able to get connected in. If you're trying to get to this meeting, of course, it's the link for the Baudette Association meeting. There's a link from the website. Okay, volunteer forms, you can see how to get those, and email requests if you want to reach out to Diane at BaudetteAssociation.com. She'll be happy to get you that form. And we are looking again for volunteers who want to serve and help with the community and maintaining who we are, what we are, and where we are. Okay, next slide, please. And this slide, financial stewardship, I'm going to ask Robert to pick this up. Robert, please.
Thank you, John. Our basic philosophy for our finances is to try to avoid debt, if at all possible, and only incur debt where the situation, a very special situation, justifies it. But it's not something that we generally want to do. The other thing we need to do is maintain appropriate reserves to protect our assets and to maintain our assets as they age over time. Our basic annual dues, not including the supplemental dues, just the basic annual dues, have increased modestly 3 times in the last 7 years or so. With this next chart that we talk about in a minute, we'll show kind of what the trend was. As I mentioned before, we're currently debt-free. We have, at the end of last year, we had $1,062,000 in cash held in reserves for the various assets that we're managing. We transitioned to a new financial system. It's called TOPS, T-O-P-S, and over 600 homeowners associations across the country are utilizing this system. It is much more sophisticated than the QuickBooks system that BHA and the old Stage 2 were using. And when we did the merger, the complexity of our financial arrangements really dictated that it made sense to move to a more sophisticated system. And the system is up and running and has been very successful so far. And then in 2020, we conducted our first professional reserve study, and this had been recommended by our outside auditor and is clearly consistent with national best practices. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you, Carol. So this shows up at the top left there, the trend in the dues. So you saw an increase in 2018 to 390. That was maintained for 3 years, and this year we've gone from 390 to 450. Virtually all of that's associated with reserve increases, which we'll talk about again in a minute. On the right-hand side, it shows the annual budget over a couple of years. And I want to make 2 comments here. Clearly, you see the budget going from a big increase in the budget from 2018 to 2019 associated with the merger. And then oddly, if you look at the budget in 2021 and 2020, it appears to be essentially flat, which in aggregate, that is true. And so you may ask, well, why on earth are we increasing the dues to $450? And the reason is the budget of the 2021 budget of $1,227,000 is actually built up of 3 kind of different areas. The basic BHA operating budget, operating cash budget, and then our reserve budget, and then lastly, the supplemental neighborhood budget. So all 3 are combined together. And as I mentioned before, the supplemental neighborhood budgets in aggregate went down $69,000. And so that reduction is kind of hiding the fact that the reserve budget actually increased. And so the increase in the dues from 390 to 450 is built into that number, but you don't see an increase because the supplemental neighborhood budgets basically have offset it. I guess next slide. Okay, the 2020 reserve study. So neither BHA nor Stage 2 had ever done a reserve study. Carol, are we good? This is the one we're using here? So we decided that we would do one for the first time in 2020, again, encouraged by the outside auditor. And we looked at a number of potential providers, and we ended up working with Global Solution Partners, which is a relatively large company. They have over 20 years experience. And frankly, the most important factor we looked at was they have significant coastal North Carolina community experience. So they're familiar with dealing with aging assets in a beach environment with lots of salt air and all the various issues associated by being close to the ocean. So the study provides estimates for what they think the remaining useful life is of all of our assets and what they believe the replacement cost is, and then they make a recommendation about how to fund over time to meet reserves so that when the asset needs to be replaced, the money is there to look at it. And I won't list them all, but the areas below are the areas that they looked at in terms of putting recommendations together. Next slide. Okay, so what were the results? Just by way of background, we have over $3 million worth of assets that we are managing. And for the most part, the results of the study compared to what we were doing, quote unquote, more informally, were generally pretty consistent. There weren't major deviations. The two areas where there were fairly significant deviations were the association center building itself and a series of master walkways that are throughout certain areas, primarily in Stage 2, but a few in other areas where there were some differences. And they were recommending increases in the annual reserve set-asides for the association center and the master walkway. We looked at this, and rather than jumping to the level that they recommended, which would have been a big increase, we decided, at least initially, to increase it only by 25% of what was recommended. And that is primarily the driver of the increase in the dues to the $450 level. And then we said we were going to look a little bit more carefully at the results of this study and some of the things that came out of it. And the reason I mentioned that is we didn't really get a final version of the study till early December, which is kind of late in our budget process. And so we had to try to make some decisions fairly quickly, and we decided we would look at it a little more methodically during 2021 and adjust where accordingly. One area I just want to mention to flag, the battery 4, we only have a very small reserve for battery 4, and we decided not to put any additional reserves in for battery 4 in our annual dues for 2021, pending kind of a further study about what really is our long-term objective with respect to battery 4. What are the options that we can do with that? So once we come to a conclusion about what the long-term strategy is, we'll make a decision about providing for reserves there. And the reserve requirements there are primarily associated with the wooden walkways and various signs. So having done this, I think our plan is to try to update it every 5 years, which is kind of normally what happens with associations that do the studies. And again, it's consistent with what the accepted best practices are in today's environment. One last thing is John Kinney, maybe 20 minutes ago or so, did mention that BHA has a 50% interest in a number of lagoons, and I believe 100% interest in a few lagoons. And over time, those lagoons may actually have costs associated with them, primarily related to dredging, if they get too filled up with silt. And we have not established any reserves for that. And we're going to take a look at the lagoon issue again at a strategic level during 2021 to try to determine what is the best thing to do with the lagoons. And then the last thing, which really is a judgmental thing, is before the merger, BHA's philosophy was to provide reserves at a level that theoretically would result in having 100% of an asset reserve by the time it needed to be replaced. Stage 2 philosophy was to use 75%, a slightly lower amount. And when we did the merger, initially we went from 75% to 100% as we were trying to harmonize the reserve philosophy. And the reality is some homeowners associations do reserve at 100%, some do less than 100%, some do 75, some do 80, whatever. So given the result of the study and the suggestion that we need to potentially increase reserves with respect potentially to Battery 4, the association center, the various master walkways, we also said, let's take a look at our replacement philosophy of the 100% level and see whether we feel comfortable potentially reducing that slightly, which would, of course, reduce the dues moving forward. I think that's it, John.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Next slide, please. Okay, we're going to take a look at the wildlife overlooks, history about the overlook itself. I know this is a topic that's important to each and every one of you and all of us as well. There's been many, many hours and study and research done on this to determine what is practical, what's realistic, what's good for us to provide recreation and safety, all the things that are important to each and every one of us. I won't read all of the information on there. Again, this presentation is available and will be made available online for you to come back and read and look at. And if you have further questions, etc., after we've gone through this, we'll certainly try to take care of getting you answers on those. But the overlook itself grew out of a partnership between the Baudette Association and the Broadhead Island Conservancy. And that was brokered back in the Thad Wester days, the Generator Society days. And the intent was the educational effort. It was an overlook, the alligators, the birds, and other wildlife. It is quite a place to go and sit and observe, sit down, be quiet, recreate, whatever in these cases. It was used by the Conservancy as a location for its nature and birding type programs, and we still have a partnership with them. They're going to do a lot of studies, a lot of work, and use of this when it's properly rebuilt and in a safe standard. We have the school children that come over annually, many bus loads of those across the summer. There are field trips here, and we will be providing for them, again, a very safe place that they can take a look at, observe, and enjoy and appreciate and study the impact and importance of nature and preservation, etc. It also serves as a great vantage point for our visitors, us as island guests that live here ourselves, and so forth. So we know it's a place of great enjoyment, and we want it to be that again in a very useful way. It was originally built and maintained by Joyce Hatley and Wayne Lambert, and it was damaged beyond repair when Florence came through, and then Dorian took the rest of it out. So basically, it had to be condemned, shut down. And I can tell you that we, as a committee or as an association, we studied, we looked at this, and we tried to determine what do we need to do. But the annual meeting in 2019, there was a unanimous endorsement that we all like it, we enjoy it, and yes, we want it built back. That's the initial scope, and that initial scope was, okay, we know what we've had, what we're used to, and we're happy with that, and yes, we'd like to continue to have something out there to use in a similar fashion. So then safety concerns came up, and we took a look at alligators coming up or interacting, that they've become accustomed to humans. We've had a problem where we found individuals that were cleaning fish and dumping the remains into there. It was neat to toss in marshmallows and let the alligators come up. These type things, human interaction, can't be tolerated. It's a recipe for disaster and concern. So we had to be concerned about those things. To take a closer look at this, we reached out to the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission. I know we've had some questions. People say, well, did we involve the Wildlife Resources Commission in helping us determine and decide a rebuild for this and what we should do to make it safe? Has the Conservancy been involved? And the answer is yes, absolutely. We met numerous times with the Wildlife Resource Commissioners from the state. They came out along with Chris Shank from the Conservancy and different ones. And we studied, we looked at, and we determined what would be necessary for a safe design, a proper design, and one that we wouldn't have to worry about down the road. We reached out and looked at, determined we needed an architect to help work with this. We have an architect, Peter Quinn, who serves on the ARC board for the members here. And we asked Peter about a design and recommendation for this build. He suggested an architect, and that was Gordon. And once we reached to Gordon, he felt that Gordon would be better, historically better with determining and reaching out, thinking out of the box, had the resources, the know-withal to come up with a good, safe design that would be aesthetically pleasing, fit in, etc. And we would make this thing what it should be, and it would pass today's safety standards. It would pass today's handicap standards, etc. So a request for proposals was sent out to 12 different builders once we came up with this particular design through the help of Gordon and the architects, the Wildlife Commission, the Conservancy's input, etc. Again, many hours went into this. We even took a look at, should we just close the thing down? But it's just too popular. And if you did a rating, it was in the top 5 things people want to see if they come to Baudette Island. If they know there's a gator hole or a wildlife overlook, they want to go there and look at it and see it. So we put out bids. We asked for bids. Bids came in from 12 different builders and contractors out there on the island. So that happened in June. The bids received ranged from $143,000 up to a staggering $720,000. And I know it's a little bit difficult to see, but if you look at the design, the work, the meticulous input about something that's going to be safe, that's going to be here for longevity, that will be as maintenance free as we can make it. It has stainless hardware in it. It has galvanized metal and fabrication that will be put in the water and around for the safety of everyone. Those things are a little bit expensive. So after we solicited the bids, got those in, the board reviewed the contracts. We had the architect interview several of these builders to determine his recommendation of a builder and who would build this. And the bottom line is we accepted the second lowest bid from Trinity Builders to build this. And again, you can see the complication of this thing. And I shouldn't say complication. I should say the excellent design to have something that will be long lasting, relevant to us all, and we can be very proud of in the future. The construction has commenced and is expected to be completed in the late spring of 2021. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, while we're waiting on the next slide, I can, there it is. This again helps you realize a little bit more about the rebuild of the overlook itself, addressing again the safety concerns that were out there. And the Wildlife Commissioner explained to us, alligators are probably not your primary liability. However, you don't want them under this platform or residing there. And we know in the older build, the original build, the gators love to stay under that platform. And that's how this mesh design came about and was instituted and put in. And we also talked about the barrier between water and humans. And per the North Carolina wildlife folks, your biggest concern is people that might wander around the sides and drown in the water. That is a greater liability or concern, should be. And so with that in mind, the slick path to the right of the overlook that had evolved over years and was frequented by a lot of our guests and visitors and homeowners alike that are out here, we incorporated a bird viewing area because in the summers and in the evenings, there's quite a show of beautiful birds out there, and this way we could provide a viewing platform for one to meditate, sit quietly, observe, see the many species of birds, etc., that come in and out of there. And we had a comfort level of safety that we didn't have to worry about someone wandering into the edge of the water or slipping and falling and being in there. So the primary guard structure you can see in this diagram, and again, I would encourage you to go to the website, look at these, includes vertical and angled shielding components that consist of the hot dip galvanized steel. All that was specially being cut, made, and fabricated for us at a fairly expensive piece, but again, built for the safety protection, today's standards, and everything as completed will meet the American Disabilities Act. The stainless steel connection hardware, we chose to go not with galvanized or coated. We wanted, it was recommended to the board, use stainless. A stainless steel bolt, most of you know, if you go to the hardware to pick one up, they're $1 a bolt. But guess what? That stainless steel is going to be there forever, and we don't have to worry about it as far as maintenance down the road, etc. The deck itself will be treated with a slip-resistant coating for an additional safety feature. So again, encourage you to go to the website and look at the detail that's put into this. Next slide, please. Excuse me. The bird viewing area, again, this is an actual picture from the side area of this pond, and you can see the ibis and cranes, etc., that come in there in the afternoons. And during the season when these birds are migrating and coming through, it is a beautiful sight to behold, if you will. The additional design, I should say, additionally, we did designate parking. If you are used to going by there looking at this particular overlook, there was not really a place to park other than one cart or two carts to pull in, and they were pulled in right at the entrance to the platform. So we have designed, or the architect designed in and landscaped a parking area and an area to put a bicycle and for cart parking so that we make that a safe area too. Landscaping itself, the association's contractor did remove several trees to get this build done, but I can assure you, I know John Kinney mentioned our Operation Reforest, and I know we've gotten grants, and we have grant money, and we continue to pursue additional grant money that will be used in the re-landscaping, reforestation, planting of the native trees, plants, shrubs, etc., to make this a beautiful and aesthetically pleasing area to all of us when it's completed. And the other point, I don't want to dwell on this, and I'm not pointing a finger, but I would like to just point out that much of this property that we're working with is on right-of-way and easement from the road. We also received permission from the village to construct and build what we're doing there because it does cover part of the easement or right-of-way and easement areas. Duke Energy has a very large transformer or switch station there. Duke had to remove a lot of that vegetation on the right-of-way just to get to that transformer and start their work. The new transformer is being fabricated and built in Ohio. We have met numerous times on site with Duke Energy and Masco that you see all over the island putting in the infrastructure, about getting this done and completing it without removing any more of the trees or understory. And what has been removed will be replanted and put back to an acceptable state by the association. But Duke is committed to get that gearbox put in there as quickly as it's fabricated and delivered from Ohio. There are 3 of those, and they were featured in the Village Voice a while back. If you look back or go to the websites of the village, you'll see that is state-of-the-art transmitting stations and switch stations that are being built, and the first 3 are coming to Broadhead Island. And it's a plus for us because it's designed to withstand submersion, water, etc. So the upgrade to utilities comes at a price to, if you ride down Federal Road, you're going to see the little cutouts where we have to bore, or Duke has to put these things in. But it does come back, and we'll get it fixed. Excuse me. So that being said, as soon as Duke has that transformer in place, switch station, they will pour a pad, place the new station, then they will have to do the switcheroo. Of course, you have to have the new one on site and ready, unless you want to shut power down for a week or so, or 2 or 3 days while they switch them out. So this will be a quick switch as quickly as possible, not to disrupt power for more than a minimal amount of time. Once that transformer is here, installed properly, then the cables and lines will be switched over. The old switch box then will be removed. Once that completes itself, and we have asked and are pushing for timetables on that, then the final landscaping, planting back, etc. And Duke, we have asked for help from Duke of landscaping and finishing this back, will be completed on the site, and it should look great for us all again. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. As far as cost of the Overlook, we've mentioned that briefly, but here's some breakdown for you. I know we had people asking, well, why is it costing so much? And hopefully you've seen from the design, the build, and the concern of the association for its membership and guests and visitors where this has led us to. But excuse me, the architect is a $16,000. You've got the breakdown there. The construction management, that bid was $296,000. The education, signage, etc., and production of that will be $5,000. And we do intend to identify the many species of birds, etc., and make this a teaching educational area, again, for the school kids coming through, as well as the general public, the tourists, our guests to the island, and ourselves, our grandchildren, etc. The landscaping fee is in there. Permitting, the village will provide that. We have no worries with that. The survey work is completed, and of course the legal work on that, the contingency has to be in there just in case you don't know what will or won't pop up. I would like to also emphasize that the basic footprint, the footprint of this new rebuild is the exact same footprint of the old Overlook. I know when the sign went up, that was an attempt to help people realize, understand, and visualize what would be there. And I will be the first to say it looks monstrous. It's not. It will fit in that area. It's the same footprint. It will have some better viewing opportunities and will be much safer when it's all said and done. So we'll look forward to getting that finished and enjoyed by many and all. So stay tuned for that, and we will certainly keep you informed and updated. And we'll keep you apprised of pictures, photos, and the work that's being done. Okay, next slide, please. At this point, Alan, you're going to take over for a minute.
Okay, I'm still waiting for the next slide. Is it on the horizon? I don't have it yet, John. I now have it. Yes, it is on the horizon. And thank you, John, for that presentation on the Overlook. On the horizon, and that really means what are we thinking about for this year? What are our priorities? And while they're yet to be developed at the retreat, this gives you sort of a indication of what we're thinking about. The wildlife overlook completion obviously is the number one, very, very important. We've got the long-range strategy for lagoons, as both John and Robert have alluded to. Evaluation on communications. We've got the BHI community directory, and as you recall, that had previously been done by the Conservancy, and the BHI has been taking that over, will be taking that over, and that'll take place this year. Completing turning over maintenance responsibilities for alleys to the village of Broadhead Island. And we'll do a reserve study analysis as Robert has talked about. We'll then go forward with the community-wide standards evaluations that I alluded to earlier, that was presented by the long-range planning group, and that we have adopted for the evaluations that have begun. Okay, next slide. This is the checklist that is being used for the community-wide standards evaluation. And that is when the associate from Broadhead drives around to do the evaluations. This is the checklist, is to identify generally from the exterior what sort of problems or issues are there, if any. And the effort will be to see if there can be an evaluation of each home over the course of a year. Again, as I've indicated, no one's going to be coming onto the property. This is just an exterior evaluation of the home and the landscaping, and this will help identify where there are issues, if there are any. Okay, next slide. And John, I think this comes back to you.
Okay, thank you, Alan. And as a point of order, the ballot and voting has been closed as of 10 o'clock. Thank you for the responses and the folks coming in. The folks will tally that and bring us the results to be announced later today. Well, at this point, I would like to just one quick thing before I move on to the Honorable Mayor and the other presenters. I would like to acknowledge we have received this morning another bit of information asking for questions to be answered about the overlook, etc. Hopefully, and I'm acknowledging that we did get that this morning. We have hopefully answered many of your questions here and given you the opportunity to go visit our website, look at it, and by all means, if you have additional questions, we're happy to sit down with you, review these, show you these plans, the processes, etc. But again, I wanted to acknowledge that. At this point, we thank you for listening to the association's presentations, and I will introduce next from the Village of Broadhead Island, the Honorable Mayor, Andy Sawyer. Andy?
Okay, am I live here?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay. All right. Greetings. Let me start out with some good news for all of our island community. Sand is once again flowing on the beach. Since it is projected to be of an unusually large volume, the plan is for disposal to reach past the Shoals Club. However, this is a navigation project at federal expense, not a shoreline stabilization project at our expense. Closely. Due to the pandemic, almost everything seems to take more time. Our contractor services improvements are no exception. The building foundation, unfortunately, we did not receive 3 bids for the structure, so we must re-advertise, hopefully awarding the contract around February 5th. Also scheduled this winter are further improvements to stormwater management, in particular enhanced capabilities at the creek outfall under and improved surface drainage around the 3rd hole. This is only the beginning of a most importantly, although we've had some retirements and departures, The village has made promising new hires who are bringing renewed energy and innovative ideas to village efforts. As with any organization, we are only as good as our people. And now on to the Broadhead Island Transportation Authority. I preface my comments by stating that I believe that the concepts inherent in the legislation can be a viable solution to the long-term operation and management of the transportation system. I also believe that the authority would benefit from a few adjustments to the statute. However, there is no doubt that the authority has made meaningful progress, especially in the structure of the financing. Some of us have concerns about the high appraisals and the revenue projections in this high-risk, low-growth enterprise. As I am uncertain that all costs necessary to operate a transportation system that reflects the values of the entire Broadhead Island community have been taken into consideration. Generally, I am referring to deferred and future capital expenditures. In particular, I am concerned about the deficiencies at both terminals, although for different reasons. At Deep Point, the fundamental concept of arrivals utilizing the upper level for baggage and passenger management and departures using the lower level has not worked in recent memory, or perhaps really ever, despite an obvious need during the high season and many other holidays. On the island, there is not enough land to accommodate efficiently and safely the many functions required at this critical infrastructure. Trams, dollies, carts, employees, passengers, baggage, and the occasional emergency vehicle all compete for space in this constricted area. But perhaps I'm getting ahead of myself. For the past 3 years, the authority has worked mostly in closed session in order to protect negotiating positions, but also in accordance with confidentiality agreements signed with the seller. Therefore, there has been very little transparency or explanation of this large and complex transaction. Early January, this month, the negotiating subcommittee of the authority made a presentation to the Local Government Commission, which is the state agency responsible for approving local debt. It is chaired by the state treasurer. At that presentation, most of the previously privileged information became public. At an authority meeting the following week, a financing schedule was presented projecting local government commission approval in early February, followed a few years by the sale of the revenue bonds needed to finance the transaction. Obviously, this left little time to explain and justify the transaction to the many and varied members of the Broadhead community, whose user fees are the basis for paying off the debt. Later that week, the village council at its regular meeting approved unanimously a letter to the state treasurer asking for a delay of 6 months in order for the authority to inform and interact with the concerned public. We have been informed that the local government commission will approve this postponement. So where does all this stand now? It is the council's hope that the Broadhead community will engage the authority with an open mind and an appreciation of its difficult task. There is much to be appreciated in the proposed structure of the ongoing management and operation of the transportation system. However, I believe there is further work to do. Most of it not difficult, but some will require cooperation, creativity, and diligence. After this further investigation, which very well might not take the full 6 months, there is certainly the possibility that the debt, the purchase price, and the needed improvements are all justified and accounted for. Forthcoming. I know that there is growing interest and concern in the community. I am working with the authority to create a user-friendly means of communication, hopefully placed by early next week. As always, the village council and staff will stand ready in support of the entire Broadhead community. System. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Andy. And at this point, we will introduce Chris Webb, the Executive Director for Old Body. Chris, please. And are you on mute, Chris? Chris Webb, do we have you? Okay, let's go to the next presenter and we'll see if we can get Chris back up. Next slide, please.
Hold on just a moment, Chris. Just because you have that long presentation or the many slides in there, look on your computer and see if you can unmute yourself. I'm going to leave it alone for just a moment.
Okay, we have Pam and Chris trying to work out the slide presentation.
Can't hear. All right, I'm going to go ahead and flip through then, and we're going to go to Joyce Fulton.
Okay, in the interest of everyone's time, Chris has a lot of slides, as she always does, which is excellent for us. We're going to go to Joyce Fulton, and Joyce, you'll be presenting for Broadhead Association or Broadhead Island Limited. Joyce?
Thank you, John. I hope everyone can hear me. Chad Paul, Broadhead Island Limited CEO, is also attending the meeting today. And this report could be entitled, Did You Know? And Falling Dominoes. Did you know? Because as you focus on a sustainable future for the island, history is important. Falling dominoes because all pieces had to successively fall to complete transition of legacy assets. Important to the Mitchell family legacy was and is transition of assets with a focus on providing viable long-term solutions for the asset and the island. Since Chad Paul became Limited CEO 11 years ago, he has worked with various island entities and individuals to transition legacy assets. Numerous joint infrastructure improvement projects, one being the construction of the Transmarsh Bridge and repaving of Keelson Row, placed the domino in position to allow dredging at the harbor, deeding, of the harbor roads to the village, a project requiring 4 island organizations working in unison for the benefit of the island. A complex group of transactions called the Global Agreement in 2015 allowed multiple dominoes to fall into place, enabled by the club, the yacht clubs, transportation, and limited. This complex agreement provided for independent governance by each organization and created opportunity for the yacht club to sell slips. This multidimensional transaction involves 6 major organizations collaborating for the future of their organization, as well as the long-term interests of the island. In 2020, Limited sold its residential and real estate property management businesses to Intercoastal Realty Corporation, the largest and most successful real estate company in southeastern North Carolina with a 45-year track record. This sale continues Limited's goal of transitioning assets with a focus on the island's long-term viability. Island-wide, Broadhead Island had its best real estate sales year in its history in 2020 as consumers in congested urban areas sought a safe haven where they could live full-time or on a vacation getaway. I've mentioned just a few examples of legacy transactions. Resolving difficult challenges is not a game, but picturing dominoes successively falling so that organizations with independent governance structures can thrive is the objective. Perhaps the most difficult challenge for island sustainability is the transportation system. Ferries, trams, parking, and barge. The island leadership has recognized for over 30 years the need for a long-term governance solution for transportation and its inherent logistic structure. Did you know that in 1987, the Broadhead Island Club original documents and agreements granted a first right to purchase transportation company to the BHA and a second right to the village? However, if neither wanted to acquire transportation, it would be sold to the club. So in 1991, the club membership voted to remove references in the club documents to acquisition of the transportation system. Most of you know that in 1993, the North Carolina Utilities Commission began regulation of the ferries and trams. But have you heard of the 1998 community club forums and island access conferences? These were serious, focused leadership meetings that unfortunately resulted in no long-term solutions for the transportation system. Did you know that in September 1998, the village began discussions with the state of North Carolina about establishment of a state-operated ferry system to the island? Contacts with the ferry division of the Transportation Department indicated that it might be feasible for the ferry division to provide the desired public ferry service if and only if the village underwrote all of the millions of capital funding and operating subsidies required for the state to provide such service to the island. The state would not subsidize fares or operations to Broadhead Island as it does at other North Carolina public ferry sites. So in June 1999, the Village Council voted against asking the North Carolina Division of Ferries to proceed with the proposals based on the exorbitant potential subsidy required and cost to purchase and develop a different terminal location. Did you know that in 2013, the village created the Strategic Initiatives Group, which listed ultimate disposition of the transportation system as one of its top 4 priorities? For the last 11 years, Limited has helped orchestrate complex island transactions to facilitate transition of legacy assets. In this same vein, a long-term viable solution for transportation is Limited's objective. In July 2017, the North Carolina General Assembly enacted the Ferry Transportation Authority Act to provide reliable, safe, public ferry transportation services in its service area. The Broadhead Island Transportation Authority received a certificate of incorporation from the Department of the Secretary of State in August of 2017. In its defined role, the Transportation Authority will establish rates, fees, charges, routes, schedules for transportation services. The transition from a privately owned transportation system to a publicly owned system addresses Broadhead Island's critical need for long-term governance and stewardship of ferry services and related logistics operations. It also provides seamless integration and interoperability between the various companies and departments that support transportation. The past 11 years of legacy transitions from Limited demonstrates a focus on finding and implementing solutions that serve the long-term best interests of the island. Limited believes the Transportation Authority ensures the efficiency, viability, and stability of Broadhead Island's ferry transportation system going forward. Anyone with questions about the Transportation Authority should plan to attend the Transportation Authority meeting on Wednesday, 3 February at 9:15 a.m. I'm sure the village can provide the number to call into the meeting. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Joyce, for that report. A lot of good information for us there. And Chris Webb, do we have Chris ready to go now? Pam, do we have Chris Webb?
Hi, Chris. I think we've got you trying again. Can you try it one more time? I don't think she's ready, John. We're going to go on then. It'll be Cam Mcintyre.
Okay, our next presenter then will be Cam Mcintyre. Cam.
Hi, everybody. You hear me okay? And we're going to go through the slides to get to me, but I'll go ahead and start. I'm the president of the Public Service Auxiliary. Yay, my slide's up. Oh boy, and my picture. Public Service is one of the oldest volunteer organizations on Broadhead. For those of you that don't know us, we have been around since before the year 2000. We've been sort of dormant, of course, because of COVID, but we're back. We have a new chief, and we're asking for your help. We have 2 missions, basically. One is that we are the volunteer organization, as you see on the left side of the slide. We support public safety during time of an on-island emergency. This summer, for example, we unfortunately had a fire. It was hot, and we needed to supply fans and water and food to the officers during that time. I would love to have you volunteer. Please reach out and email. We need some new muscle. You don't have to be on island to full-time at all to volunteer for this.
You check the.
I think she just left.
Oh.
Okay, I'll keep talking over. But you just need to answer your phone and pass on information so that we get a staff to help support. We are also the 501c3 organization to accept donations in thanks for public safety. And all of our proceeds go to supplement the needs that the department has that are not covered in the village budget. In recent years, we have bought bicycles, we've bought special flashlights, we've bought extra radios, binoculars for people to be able to see during a sea rescue. Little items, but important items that help public safety officers. And when the firehouse opened, of course, we staffed the complete kitchen and living quarters for the public safety officers. We're happy to help with that because it really is a community organization supporting all of us on Broadhead. So I'm happy to announce that we're going to try to have a new variation of our famous chili supper, which we've had in the past, which was a good community event. It will be Friday, February 12th from 4 to 6 p.m. We're going to do it as a drive-through, though, because of COVID restrictions. You're going to drive through the firehouse bay in your golf cart, and you're going to take home containers of chili and brownies for dessert. We have over 20 volunteers so far already who have will volunteer to bring chili to the firehouse. We mix it all together, and we get the best chili mix available that evening for dinner on Broadhead. We're following all COVID protocol, masks, gloves, etc. And you're going to need to wear a mask when you drive through in your golf cart. We'll have fire hats and trinkets for the kids. And while we are the oldest organization on Broadhead, we are not yet the most sophisticated. So it has to be cash only or a check made out to public safety. Dinner, as you see on the slide, is going to be for 2 people. $20, chili and brownies for 4, $35, but we will gladly take all donations because we are back and we are here to support our public safety. Please reach out to me if on my email address that you see there if you would like to volunteer, and I look forward to hearing from you, and thanks to the association for this opportunity to speak.
Okay, Cam, thank you so much, and I can certainly vouch for how welcome and relieved you are. We did have some really hot fires, unfortunately, in the last couple of years, and when you're out there in that full suit and trying to keep that contained, and you need some water, or you need a sandwich or a break, they're there for us. So please support that. The chili is always great. You can't get a bad bowl of chili because they pour everybody's together and stir it up with the big paddle. So please come out and support that. Okay, next we're going to move ahead with Chris Shank, Executive Director for the Baudette Island Conservancy. Chris, welcome.
Morning. Yeah, chili and brownie sound pretty good on a day like today too. So awesome. Look forward to it. Yeah, so I appreciate the chance to come speak with you. Obviously, I mean, I love being in person with everybody. So we're going to do the best we can here. This picture is a sunrise over the water that we see on the ferry coming over every day, and it's just a great way to spark the brain to get going and thinking about things. And what I try and do with these presentations is just talk a little bit about what we learned about Broadhead Island, and we're going to talk about some of the work we've done in 2020. So next slide, please. So one of the things I've been really trying to do over the past few years is to grow our research partnerships. If we really want to protect the island, we need to know as much about the nature and what's around us as possible. It includes, you know, all the different habitats, all the species, and how everything's linked together. And so, and our current research partnerships are varied, and you can look through this list. I've got working with people that are hydrogeologists, people that are actually wildlife biologists studying coyotes. We have people working on coastal physics, maritime forest ecology, which is a really cool project that we're just starting to understand the impact of disturbance, you know, whether it's deer eating seedlings or whether it's hurricanes, right? We need to understand how the forest responds. The salt marsh and tidal creek, PFAS and gators, thanks to BHA for allowing us to get into some of those lagoons and sample the alligators. Sea turtle navigation, still working with Carolina. We just had a really cool paper published with a guy from University of Georgia about population dynamics of our sea turtle population and their nesting fidelity. And, you know, the old wives' tale, and I think I talked about this at last year's BHA, is that, you know, they always return to the same beach. Well, that's a great story. It's not exactly true, and we found that out with some DNA testing. And it just got published in Marine Biology, which is a big journal, and also East Carolina. So we got a lot of partners, a lot of academic folks who are real experts in these areas, and it's really, we've learned a lot. All right, next slide, please. Much to learn for sure. All right, everybody wants to know about sea turtles. It's a busy season. Last year we had the record 175, I think, was our total. This year we had 115 nests. We lost about half of them due to Isaias, which was a bummer. But we did manage to get about 5,000 of the hatchlings out to the sea, which is really good. Hit the button. I think this is gonna. There we go. One thing that we're doing now, we got a grant from North Carolina Sea Grant to try and work on nest protection, and we're doing different designs of the cages to try and see which ones are most effective at preventing coyotes. And we do see some foxes on some of our pictures as well. You can kind of see that in one of these pictures. You know, how do we protect the nest? What type of material should we use? Right, and it's a cost-benefit analysis as part of this. But a busy season. You know, we had only 4 interns instead of 6. And one really cool thing, we saw Kemp's Ridley come on our beach, which is the smallest and rarest of all sea turtles. They typically nest around the Gulf of Mexico. There's not recorded one around here anytime. So we saw one of these nesting in the afternoon, and we're able to, I think it's a nest hatch, which is pretty cool. So, all right, next slide, please. Coyotes, they're still here. We saw less of them in our spotlights studies that we do at night through our Sea Turtle Patrol. We saw less of them on the beaches in 2020 than we did in 2019. They're still here, and we still see some activity. Obviously, if y'all ride around on the roads, they'll let you know that they're there. Why? We don't know. We don't know if they're spreading out. Maybe the food wasn't as was more available in the forest and other locations than it wasn't, and having to get into the nest this year. But they're still here. Well, we did see less of them. Maybe some of them migrated up towards Fort Fisher. We really don't know, but it's definitely something we need to keep an eye on and understand a little bit more about their carrying capacity. Certainly 2019 was the high water mark. Hopefully we won't have to deal with that in 2021. Okay, next slide. They're still here, but less visible. Well, mostly. Our deer population, people always want to know about deer. So we do a couple of different studies during the year, fall and summer. One helps us understand the total number, and the other one helps us understand the sex ratio, which is important in understanding overall dynamics, because when we do the fall spotlight, we put out corn and the males will dominate. So you'll get a completely skewed view of how many males and females you have. So we have to do it in a variety of different ways. One thing we added this year, through our contract, was understand vector-borne pathogens through ticks. And people worry about Lyme disease and some of the other tick-borne pathogens, and we see some of that. We see a little bit of Lyme. We see some of the anaplasma and some of the other pathogens in the tick population around here. And but it's not just the deer that they live on, right? Any type of the small warm-blooded rodents, the coyotes. There's a lot of ways that the ticks will live and thrive in a forest. It's one of the There's not many drawbacks to having a vibrant maritime forest, but unfortunately tick population is one of them. So we started to take a look at that a little bit this year. Okay, next please. The deer population does appear somewhat stable for now, but they can certainly grow quickly if we don't watch it for whatever reason. And part of the challenge, our coyotes, we think, are taking out a lot of the fawns, which is kind of keeping it lower. But deer can also, population can grow relatively quickly. So we're keeping an eye on that. Next slide. The groundwater was a big topic last year, so I wanted to bring a little bit back into this year, and just press the button one more time for me, please. So the question was, we got, people want to know, they're doing this dredging. They're talking about dredging the Cape Fear River to allow the post-Panamax ships to come up, which should substantially increase the depth. And there was a question, well, how will dredging influence the underground freshwater supply? And I talked about this last year, but underneath the island itself is a freshwater reservoir. It just has sand in it, right? And that freshwater tends to flow out along all the different edges of the island. And we also pull drinking water out of the center of the island. So people want to know, if the island population grows and you're pulling more water out and they're dredging, is that going to increase how much water we have below the ground? Because we need that water for our drinking supply, but the forest also needs that water. So Peter Zamora is one of our colleagues at UNC Wilmington, did a study, and he did a model to understand, can we isolate if dredging will impact freshwater and will sea level? And so here are the results. If you look at the blue line, if the island population grows, the freshwater will decline some. If you add in pumping, increased pumping and sea level rise, it'll drop a little further. But if you add in deepening, it essentially looks like sea level rise. So the deepening doesn't appear to impact the freshwater reservoir at all. Sea level rise appears to affect it a little bit, but the pumping is what it affects it the most. Now, before we get scared about this, look at the numbers on the left with freshwater volume, 7.125 down to 7.09. So it's a tiny fraction though. So the good news is our freshwater supply looks really good for a while, much, much less than 1% that we need to worry about losing over the next 20, 25 years. And at this point, the deepening of the channel doesn't look like it's going to have any influence, which is a really good information to know. Next slide, please. We also do water quality dynamics, and we get fecal coliform bacteria, which are kind of indicator species in the creek from a variety of the areas. And every now and then, in August of 2020, you can kind of see here near the boathouse, we sampled especially some of the outfalls, which can tend to concentrate collections of whether it's, I don't necessarily think they're broken pipe, but it certainly concentrates runoff from the land. And we saw really high levels in August of 2020. And part of the challenge with Broadhead Creek is it's closed to shell fishing basically once you get from the boathouse upwards. And so can we do something where it will allow that creek to open up to shell fishing in the future, make sure we're keeping the oysters and clams safe? Next slide, please. Occasional spikes, but where? We're trying to figure that out. We also do a lot of wildlife responses. This year, obviously, was a little crazy, but people always want to know, where people call us, our wildlife hotline. Most of them are birds. About 50% are birds. We get sea turtles, deers. We do get some snakes. One got caught in a electrical outlet box not too long ago, and we had to kind of finesse it out of there. Alligators, but a lot of different things. Next slide, please. Where do they come from? They come from all over the island. Obviously, we get the most wildlife calls during the summer, but that's not because wildlife are more imperiled in the summer. It's just that there's more people here, and so we tend to get more calls. A lot of birds, we take those over to the Oak Island Center and try and help them rehabilitate. So next slide. We try and help all kinds of critters when we can, for sure. I just wanted to make a quick announcement. We are trying to, we've been doing those lecture series at the club for a few years now, and obviously we can't do that this year, but we are doing a winter warmer lecture series with me and my science staff. You can see we have one coming up there every Wednesdays at 6. You can check out our website to see we've got things discussing our sea turtle program, what we're doing with drones. Now I'm going to do a couple oceanography lessons, which I think is awesome. Why do we have ocean dryers? How does the Gulf Stream work? I'm also going to talk a little bit about ocean and climate, the effects on local, regional, and big scales, and talk a little bit about some of our other projects. So if you're interested, check out our website for that. Next slide. One, I do want to put out a call just in case we may be looking for temporary lodging for our interns. These are our last 2 crew that we've had. It depends on what's going on with COVID, but I'm not sure we're going to be able to put 18 interns in our dorm this summer. So if you know or know somebody that might have some lodging space, please, please, please let me know. maybe just for a month or two, it would be awesome. So there's my email. Next slide. I do miss seeing y'all. It's not quite the same given this presentation, just looking at myself in a little tiny window. So hope everybody's doing all right. And thanks for listening. Thank you. I think
Okay.
that's it.
Thank you, Chris. We appreciate that and your input and help. The many things Conservancy does, of course, for us across the island. Next, we have David Sawyer, who's our CEO for the Broadhead Island and Shoals Clubs. David, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Fisher. Thank you all for giving me a few minutes this morning to provide a brief update on the Broadhead Island Club and the Shoals Club. Both clubs are working hard to improve the lifestyle for our members and their families on Broadhead Island. Next slide. So we wanted to share a brief overview of our goals for the clubs. One of our primary goals is to continue to position both clubs to be premier Atlantic Coast clubs and top destination clubs in America. We're working on continuing to improve service, amenities, programs, and events for members. We're developing better recruiting, onboarding, training, culture, and professional development and retention programs for our teams. We just hired a new full-time human resources manager to help us with our workforce development issues for both clubs. Membership is a primary business for the clubs, so we're going to continue to keep that the focus and the key driver for the health of both clubs. We're going to look for opportunities to market and brand the clubs and position them for improvement for both the Broadhead Island Club and Shoals Club. And our board is working on updating our strategic plan for the club to attract the next generation of new members to Broadhead Island. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, membership is our key business, and we just wanted to share a brief chart of membership activity. The club had 197 membership transfers in 2020. That's more than double what we had in 2019 due to the brisk real estate activity on the island. And as you can see, the full number of full members increased, lifestyle memberships also increased, and overall club membership grew in 2020. Next slide. So the club's financial position continues to improve thanks to the support of all of our members. This past year, the club had $12.7 million in revenues. That was up $1.1 million over prior year. Membership dues was $6.3 million of that. As I mentioned, the club had 197 membership transfers, and the guest membership program grew despite COVID. As everyone on this call remembers, the club had to shut down guest membership activity from March 19th until May 27th. So in the second quarter, we lost virtually all guest membership activity, but the rest of the summer was booming, and we had 634 member homes that participated in the rental program, and the guest membership fees contributed $1 million to the club in 2020, not including golf or food and beverage usage. Next slide. Golf and tennis both saw a significant increase in activity as members and families sought safe outdoor activities this year. Golf rounds increased 11,000 rounds in 2020. We had 38,000 total rounds, with 82% of that being member rounds. Golf revenues increased 15% over prior year despite COVID. Golf lessons doubled in 2020 with our Director of Instruction, Abby Bird. And as you can imagine, with all that activity, golf course maintenance expenses increased to handle the additional maintenance of that high activity. Tennis activity also increased 30% in 2020, and the new pickleball courts were very popular, with weekly events filling up all season. We had a big focus on beginner pickleball and tennis programs this past year, which were a huge success in helping us to grow the sports. Next slide. Even with COVID, 50% capacity in our pools, the Broadhead Island Club had over 50,000 swimmers in 2020. And a lot of that was a new reservation system helped us to be able to get a whole lot of members, their family, their guests, and some guest members into the pools. The Shoals Club also had a very busy season with their pools. The Broadhead Island Club Kids Camp had 605 participants over 10 weeks. Another bright spot during the COVID year of 2020 was croquet revenue. Croquet revenue from both court fees and guest member activity increased 500% in 2020. So it was one of the busiest croquet years of activity that the club has ever seen. Unfortunately, the fitness center was closed for most of 2020 due to COVID. But when we did reopen this fall, we added a second full-time trainer. We added 10 new weekly programs, and we extended hours into the evening. Next slide. COVID-19 had a really mixed impact on the club. One of the negative impacts was the loss of member wedding and special events this past year. So that revenue stream for member events, special events, and weddings typically makes up about $500,000 of revenue for the club. So we lost that, but we did gain with member usage. Horizon's restaurant revenues increased 52% in 2020, even with COVID 50% seating capacity. The Terrace restaurant increased outdoor seating, complying with COVID capacities, and also increased member usage by 37% over the prior year. Again, the club's new reservation systems provided opportunities to keep members and staff safe, help everyone to be spaced out appropriately. And as you can imagine, takeout business has been very popular, with 19% of all food and beverage revenues served as takeout in 2020. Next slide. The Shoals Club, as you know, a very important part of the business there is the wedding business, and specifically destination wedding business. So while we had to postpone all of that in 2020, we were able to capture almost all of it in 2021 and 2022. So the island should see, as COVID wanes, an increase in wedding activity starting this summer and fall, and then extending into 2022. Both clubs continue to work together to share resources and improve synergy, club calendars, and try to improve the social aspect for both clubs. Next slide. This year, the clubs combined are going to be investing over $1 million in capital projects to improve the infrastructure, address some deferred maintenance issues, and enhance both clubs. So you'll see some things like the new roof for the golf and fitness building was completed a couple weeks ago. We installed a new HVAC chiller for the clubhouse. Not fun and exciting, but expensive and necessary. We have new roofs coming for the clubhouse starting this week. The Ocean Terrace permanent roof structure, replacing that old ugly white tent that starts this coming week. So it'll be a month-long construction project which will improve the appearance of the club and give us more functionality with permanent porch covered area up front. We're going to be completing the new parking lot project in February. That's just a couple areas around the parking lot that we installed earlier this year. We have a clubhouse exterior painting project that will start at the end of February. We have new fitness equipment coming. Completely up-to-date, state-of-the-art fitness equipment that I think will be a big enhancement for our members. We're going to be extending covered dining on the side decks at Horizons. We're going to be adding furniture in those areas, which will double the amount of outdoor seating that our members can enjoy at our restaurants. We're going to be creating a new convenient entrance for tennis and pool. Right now it's a little bit circuitous for members to be able to get to the tennis courts, and we'll have a much more enhanced entrance area. Golf course, we're going to be replacing the bulkhead on hole number 11. We're working on all of our irrigation lagoons, installing aeration bubblers for pond health. And we're going to be purchasing a generator for the club for the power outages that we have from time to time on Broadhead Island. The interior design for the restaurants at both the Shoals Club and the Broadhead Island Club are being worked on. We're going to be sharing some updated design plans with our members later this year. And we're replacing air handlers at both clubs. Next slide. The board of the club continues to work in club campus planning, and one of the first things that we needed to do to get to the next phase was acquire Swans quarters and Salt Meadow land tracts, which are the vacant land parcels that are right adjacent to the club by the tennis court and pool areas. We've been leasing those the past couple of years, but we will officially be acquiring those this spring. We're going to be sending out a member survey so we can gauge the interest of our members in next phase priorities for the club. Once we do that, we're going to be engaging a professional club master planning design firm to help chart out the future phases. We do know from our members that tennis and pickleball expansion will be a priority. Wellness facility and group fitness area expansion is going to be another top priority. Recreation fields and an event lawn, additional club parking, potential croquet updates, putting course, family recreation amenity is under consideration, an updated golf shop, and then a sports club for indoor recreation are all potential items on the drawing board. Next slide. We just wanted to thank the BHA and the ARC specifically, the board and Karen Mosteller. We had quite a few projects that the club was working on this past year, and the BHA was a wonderful partner for the club and really helped us and supported our efforts to accomplish many things. So thank you.
Okay, David, thank you very much. A lot of good information there. And unfortunately, Chris's presentation is still having some technical difficulties. Chris is going to be sure that that is available online for you to reach into, pull out, and ask questions about that, etc. Once you've had an opportunity to go through it. So at this time, again, thank you all for being a part of this. We appreciate all the presenters, those that have come, taken your time to help us all understand a little bit more about our island, who we are, where we are, and where we're going. So at this time, I would like to, we will entertain some Q&A here in just a second, but I would like to announce the count for board nominees. Robert Drumheller and Alan Briggs have been nominated to serve as terms, and the bylaws version revision has been passed. So thank you for that, and the folks that are that have taken the time to vote and make your voices heard there. With that, Pam, you're going to start with a couple of questions that go back. Are you with us, Pam? Okay,
yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you, John. And so we did ask for homeowners to email some questions prior so that I could help consolidate those. And we do have just a handful here that sounds like we can add to from the presentations and some of the talking points you've already covered. And then we have been getting many live questions, so we'll deal with those last. So let's start with this. We want to make sure we can get as many addressed as we can in the time allowed here. So for community-wide standards, if that could just be elaborated on a little bit more about the actual process and the evaluations, and just discuss that a little bit more in detail.
Okay, Alan.
Thank you, John. I'm happy to talk about that. I talked about that briefly in our discussion today, but essentially we have an associate, a Broadhead Island associate, who is part of the overall responsibilities will be to undertake a drive around portions of the island on a weekly basis in order to view the homes and to compare them against the checklist that I showed you earlier to see how the exterior of the house is doing and how is the landscape. That checklist, and you have it online, will guide you with regard to what specific things are being looked at. In the event there is something that falls below appears to the associate to fall below community-wide standards, then it is checked with the ARC as determined whether or not that appears to be a violation. If it does, there will then be a notice that will go, a letter will be sent to that particular homeowner advising them that there's trash in the yard or there's whatever there is that appears to fall below the standards. And that person will be given a period of time in order to address that and resolve the issue. And then thereafter, we'll monitor whether or not that has taken place. And there really almost been no problem. Cooperation has been very good. When the problems have been identified, most all of them have been resolved. Very few result in, and I think only whether we've had one or two that have gotten to the stage where a violation had to be identified and a hearing held to determine whether or not the homeowner had reasons why or what steps should be taken. Like any other violation, in the event it proves to be a violation, a fine can be identified and established. But all of it is, as I say, the goal of maintaining the homes on Broadhead Island so that the world and the people who come to the island will know this is the first-class community we all know it to be and we all want it to be. It's important to each of us. But that's the basic process.
Okay, thank you, Alan.
Thank you,
Next
John.
question, please.
All right, thank you. And again, we just have a few more of these that were emailed previously. And then I do have one question each for the club and the Conservancy and the village. So we'll do those in just a moment here.
Okay.
So about communications, there have been many questions about communications and how BHA communicates with its members, and some very specifically asking, they missed the email blast, and some questions about the letting members know about the wildlife overlook. So if you could just address that.
Okay, if you take a look back at the historical perspective of the wildlife, and we tried to give you a good historical perspective of that today, where it's been, where it came from, how it's evolved, and where it is today, and what we see for its future. We have tried to, again, in a very crazy world, and that's not pointing a finger for communication, but we are doing what we can to try and get this information out. We're trying to cover all of these events and changes and things that are important to all of us in the island report. I will again refer you back to the Baudette Association's website. You will get most of your questions and answers and information more detailed on that site if you will visit that and go to it. And that will help you see and understand. And then if you have a direct question, you need to come submit that to us or bring it to us. We will do our best to try to get an answer to you for that. Okay, what else do you have?
Okay, so there's one question asking, what has Broadhead Association done about reducing expenses?
Alan, you want to talk a little bit about reducing expenses?
Reducing expenses?
And it seems to be a general question about what have we done to reduce expenses. I can say this part, if you're referencing the fact that we've been in a COVID situation and we're doing a lot of distance learning, etc. Let me preface by saying, number one, we have retained our entire work staff. We've kept them employed and working, most of them from home, and we've rotated the time that they necessarily will have to come in and out of the office so that they're not all there at one time. Expense savings, there has been a little bit of expense savings when you get to the travel expenses, the ferry costs, transportation, etc. I also need to point out, though, that the expenses of cleaning, extra cleanings, etc., has not been insignificant, because the fact that the facilities, the rooms, anything when there is an event, we have to have extra cleanings. Those things have come into play. But the bottom line is there have been some minor expense reductions, but not enough that are of significance. And again, the fact that we have kept each and all of our staff employed and doing their jobs for the island. And Robert, I'll let you comment on that.
John, let me just mention two other things. We've had a couple of hurricanes over the last couple of years, I think one each in the last 3 years. And those have resulted in some, large expense increases, a lot of tree trimming and getting, vegetation removal, things like that. Those are hopefully one-off events. And, we're hoping that we're not going to see that level of frequency moving forward. The other thing we've looked at in the neighborhoods, particularly in the drip edge neighborhoods, is the mulching program to see what extent we can perhaps slow the rate of new mulching in order to reduce expenses. And so some combination of, hopefully the lack of additional costs related to hurricanes, re-examining the mulching, and those have been some of the factors that have resulted in the $69,000 supplemental neighborhood expense reduction.
Okay, thank you, Pam.
Okay, so the next one is asking about Broadhead Association's process for approving a special assessment and whether it goes to the membership or not.
Okay, Alan, would you like to speak to that, please?
Yes, John. Specifically, we're guided by 5.5, section 5.5 of the covenants on spatial assessments. And the basic rule is, as it states, the board may establish the amount of the spatial assessment for capital improvements. And if it's less than $250 a year for the assessment for a particular unit a year, then the board does not need any approval. The board itself has the authority to approve that. Here, the wildlife outlook improvements fell within that category, and that's what was approved. That is our job. That's what we did, and we approved it pursuant to 5.5 of the spatial of the covenants.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Next question, please.
Okay, so this question is asking, can the Broadhead Association advocate for homeowners in the possible sale of Broadhead Island transportation to the authority?
I'll answer that as best I know how. The answer is not an easy one. Can we advocate? Well, we don't know everyone's position on this particular situation. What we do know is this: we attend these meetings that are open to the public. We retain all the information that we possibly can. We encourage the membership. Go to the meetings. They are public sessions over in Southport, and they are announced. The meeting coming up, I know the presentation from Joyce Fulton suggesting the next meetings coming up in February, the first week of February. Those are open meetings you should go to. As far as a position on that, this is a negotiation between the state of North Carolina and the Transportation Authority that it appointed, as well as Broadhead Island Limited, who is the seller in this case. As far as our voices being heard, weighing in, we're certainly willing to publish and make available any and all news that we get on that and try to keep you informed of it. To take a position, I'm not sure what that position would be. There are many different thoughts about what, where, how this transportation might go forward or be conveyed to the state or to private enterprises, and would we benefit better from one or the other? I can't answer that, but we will make available any and all public knowledge information on the website that we can get our hands on to advocate there. So hopefully that helps. All right, Pam, next question.
Okay, all right, so let's go to one each for the club, the village, and the Conservancy. Oh, we'll go with David Sawyer first. So David, I'll let you mute yourself while I ask the question. So that was typed into the live event Q&A earlier about the pools. And the question is being asked, could the pools be illuminated with low light, of course, it said, to help extend the hours for swimming?
Thank you for that question. That's actually the first time we've ever received that request. And I would say that in the summer, with daylight going until 9 o'clock, it typically hasn't been an issue in the past, and the pools stay open until 8 o'clock. So I think the essence of the question is how do renters get more access to the pools? And I think our pool reservation system, we've been refining it this winter in preparation for this spring for both clubs. And I think that we're going to be able to help accommodate members more effectively this year. Our member-only adult lap swimming pool is going to have extended hours, 3-hour blocks. And then we'll continue with 2-hour reservation blocks for the other 3 pool areas at the Broadhead Island Club. The Shoals Club will continue with 2-hour pool blocks during the day, and they're going to have an open swim every evening at 6 o'clock. So anyone that didn't get a reservation will be able to enjoy some evening swimming at the Shoals Club.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. So let's see, Mayor Sawyer, and I'll let you unmute yourself while I ask the question. It was a very specific question asking about Whalehead Park and just asking about the maintenance of that. Could you explain to our viewers about Whalehead Park?
Yeah, Whalehead Park, as well as the common down there, are the responsibility of the village for maintenance, and it is certainly our public works folks are out all over the island trying to make the repairs necessary and doing the final maintenance, and curtailed by the COVID situation as well. So it can be done better. I know it's I think both the attention and they will get attention before the season. Thank you.
Great, thank you, appreciate that. And one for the Conservancy, so I will let Chris Shank unmute himself. And this was asking, is there a plan about improving the exterior appearance of the Conservancy, the buildings and the grounds, and how can we donate to help?
I promise I did not seed that question. It is a fantastic question to ask. Yeah, so we are in the process of a few things. One, hiring a full-time campus and facilities manager, which we have never had before, and it is very important that we get everything right. We're growing and trying to do new things. So that's one which I think will help. We also do have plans for some renovations now in the works. We've got discussions about a new roof for Turtle Central. Our dorm has some age on it. We're going to do some renovations in there. And as far as donating, yes. And if you would like to know more about what we're trying to do in the near future, please email me. I would be happy to have a conversation with anybody about what we need to do. And we're working on a campus-wide plan, actually, that will be implemented as soon as we make the new hire. So I'm always happy to make our campus look as good as we can, and any assistance that anybody has would be awesome, and we'd appreciate it.
Great, thank you for that. Okay, so I'll just keep moving on, and so these are some separate questions, and then I'll kind of group. There are many questions about the wildlife overlook. I'll group those and at those last again as time allows. So the one question about will we have access to the slides afterward? Yes, let me just answer that very quickly. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted on our website along with a PDF of all of the slides. So that'll be accessed so as soon as possible after the meeting. So the next question is about why are we voting on board seats if the only 2 nominees are already on the board? Can that be answered, please?
Well, we can answer that. We have made numerous requests today for folks that would be willing to serve. We have an additional open seat on the board right now, and we are looking for those that would be willing to volunteer their time, come in, and be a meaningful addition to the board and help move us forward and stay involved with the process. So the answer is these are the 2 nominees that we've had. No others were submitted to us that I am aware of from the community, the public. I know that we have reached out and asked for that, and we are reaching out again today. So their terms expired, and the reason they were reelected or nominated to be reelected is because they agreed to volunteer their services again to help the organization. So thank you for that question. Next.
Okay, all right. So just a few more on miscellaneous topics. So are there any plans to increase ARC meetings to accommodate the increase of building to help the process?
Okay, I'll let Tiffany answer that. Unmute, please. Okay.
Right now, there are no plans to increase the number of meetings. I think we hear a lot of submittals at each meeting, and I think it takes a lot of work by the staff to prepare all of the information that is required for these meetings. We do try to hear interim reviews when it's possible to speed things up to get more work done and more things approved so homeowners can move forward with the things that they want to do. But right now, we don't have any plans to increase the number of meetings.
Okay, thank you. And this one is kind of specific. I think this was in relation as John Kinney was speaking about Operation Reforest, WeForest, and it was asking who will maintain the trees and are they thriving?
Okay, John.
Yeah, thanks for that question. The trees that we planted over the last 2 years, there's been a mix of how those have been maintained. All of the trees that were not in the 3 communities were maintained by volunteer efforts that K-Mink solicited residents who live near the trees to water them. And that has worked out quite well. To my knowledge, in among those trees that were planted, we only lost 1 tree. So, you know, that's a pretty good record out of, well, the ones that are a year old, it's about 70 trees. In the 3 communities, it's not as good an outcome, and there's a story behind that. But I think the lesson that we take from that is it's been effective to solicit residents to water the trees. The other thing I will say that we learned from last year is we planted too early. We planted in October, and then we had another month of hot weather before we really started to get the cool, rainy weather. So because of that, we delayed planting this year until the very beginning of December. So we hope to have an equally good result from the trees that we planted this year. And if anyone would like to volunteer to be a tree keeper, K-Mink is, or myself is, you know, we're happy to assign you to a tree or allow you to pick a tree you want to help water. Hope that answers it.
Great, thank you so much. And so here was a question about some of Broadhead Association's assets and should they be owned by the village versus BHA? Why would an HOA own lagoons? And can some HOA property be donated to SILT to reduce expenses?
Okay, thank you for that question. And Robert, I'm going to let you speak to that one. I know you've got some information there.
Thank you for the question. The lagoons, I believe, were donated to the association quite a few years ago. First thing I want to say is we certainly didn't pay for them. They were donated. And I believe the club has the golf club has a partial interest, and I think the village has some interest in it because of stormwater management. And so our view is that we ought to try to get the three parties together and figure out really who is the best person to manage and own these particular assets. And that's what we're hoping to try to do next year, is work both with the village and with the club to see what makes the most sense in terms of maintaining the assets. Just quickly, with respect to the Smith Island Land Trust, it's probably not a viable solution for us because the lagoons come with some maintenance obligations, and I'm sure the Smith Island Land Trust is not in a position to be incurring potential future maintenance costs.
Okay, thank you. And so there have been many questions about the wildlife overlook. I have tried to group some of them, and if we end up running out of time again, so let me just mention that there has been a page on our website for the wildlife overlook. And don't forget, there's an easy search bar up at the top. You can search by keyword, and it's in About BHA. And that frequently asked questions does answer many of the points that some of these questions have raised today. One question asked specifically, Pam? Yes.
Yeah, what I was going to say, we are going to get tight on time here. We will accept a couple more questions. And again, we do have a Q&A that was put together specifically for some of these as they came in. And I am being respectful of the Conservancy's coming board meeting starting pretty soon. But let's go ahead and take a couple of these questions, see if we can get through the key ones and then refer to the Q&A. Thank you. Go ahead, Pam.
Okay, so one question was, did the ARC review the plans for the overlook and sign off on the removal of trees?
Okay, Alan?
The answer is that historically, the Broadhead Association has not used the ARC for much of its work. Here, the initial process on replacing the overlook, the ARC was not involved, but at one point we concluded the appropriate thing to do was to submit all to the ARC for its review. Particularly with regard to all, but one of the key aspects of that will be the replacement of the trees that were required to be removed in order to allow the equipment to access for construction, and that had to be removed by Duke for its equipment. So ARC didn't approve the removal initially, but ARC is invited. It's all been submitted to ARC for its review and approval with regard to the plans and specifications, and with regard to the particularly the landscaping and for the trees. Okay,
thank you for that, Alan. I can tell you again, we have a very extensive landscape plan that is being put together with the help of not only the John Kinney and his committees out there, but with the involvement of Duke Energy and so forth. And we have scheduled which is common practice to submit your landscaping plan or replant plan once you get your construction going, but we want that approved by the ARC. So we have that landscape plan being prepared, and it is scheduled for the February meeting. Okay, thank you. Next question.
Okay, so one of the questions about the wildlife overlook, and why are the homeowners paying for it?
Robert, would you like to entertain that question? Well, the association owns the property and the land, and one of our charges and our covenants is that we are to provide for recreational and use of the lands, etc. This gift initially was back in the days when there was very little regulation, and it was a wonderful and great gift. Unfortunately, it was destroyed. We can look at that from a positive perspective and say we have the opportunity now to, and are taking and using that opportunity to build this back to be of recreational use and safe and enjoyable for many years to come. So hope that's helpful. Next question.
Okay, so again, these are all related to the wildlife overlook. If homeowners do not approve of this expanded overlook, and if BHA is wanting to maintain a natural island, why are we rebuilding? And is this a done deal?
Well, the answer initially from the 2019 was overwhelming response to yes, we want it rebuilt. And as we have articulated today, and you can go back, I encourage you to go back and look at the presentation, the slides, the diagrams, and we have the full set of plans and views. Much thought, time, effort, and research has been put into this, involving, as we mentioned earlier, the North Carolina Wildlife Commission, the Broadhead Island Conservancy, many architect views and points, input from contractors and bidders to get this thing that is as safe as we can possibly make it, and make it a point of recreation and beauty and meditation. And there is a full landscape plan that is being put together for the ARC review to put the state back as natural as possible. You could think about this as we have a golf course. That's for the recreation and beauty and enjoyment of all of us out here. That golf course removed a lot of trees, a lot of space to open up. But was that a bad thing? Well, what is this island and what is this all about? And it's the recreation, the enjoyment of each and every one of us and our guests and those that are here. So next question, please.
Okay, and some of the questions are asking specifically about financials. And again, I would add just very quickly that the new FAQs on the website for the Wildlife Overlook may help answer some of those.
Also, the breakdown we gave you today, and we have had requests, and we certainly will try to work with anyone that has a specific request. I've had requests to see the bid sheets or contracts, and we certainly make those available if anybody wants to see them. And I do believe once you understand and realize the detail and extent of the build of this particular overlook for future enjoyment, it's understandable where the actual cost, when you put the fully allocated cost in there, that's the number you're seeing. We're not trying to hide anything, but we're giving you the full expectation that we will be in this range to pay for this. The 200 and something to build it, the 16,000 for an architect, etc. These things add up, and then the signage, etc. Okay, I'm going to stop us at this point because we're literally running out of time to respect those who want to get to the next board meetings, etc. And again, I'd like to thank everybody for their participation, for their questions, their interest. As far as board vacancies, I will again encourage you to submit if you would like to self-nominate or know someone who would like to serve. The board will be appointing for a 2-year term someone to fill Dana's position. And that is the board's request that if you submit someone and they want to send their resume in, we've given you that address for Tiffany to send to the nominating committee for review. But we need those resumes, and please, if you have someone's name or think they would be great, please make sure they're willing to serve if you have them send in a resume, etc. And we will need those by next Wednesday. Is that correct? Nominating committee?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Again, thank you to all. I'm sorry. Yes. Next slide, please. We want to wrap this with a thank you for the service of Dana. Nana served on our board. She brought a lot of depth and thought to it. She, as well as the entire board that we have here, each have our own little niche and a bit of strength and that we can bring to the board. I will tell you, and I think I would get a unanimous answer from all, that we challenge each other, and that's our role and responsibility for the best representation to the homeowners to take care of the properties we're charged and responsible for and make good fiscal and sound policy. Nana kept us to task with that. We will miss her input and so forth. We do have, for retiring board members, etc., the live oak tree plan. John Kinney spoke to that earlier. We think that's a great effort. It stands for all that we're about as far as reforesting and what's the best thing we do. We don't need more plaques out there. We need trees and bushes and so forth, and that's what we're all about and doing. We will have this particular map that will be located in the Baudette Association office, and you'll be able to view it on the website. And it is in conjunction with Operation Reforest. Reforest, these honor trees will be planted and placed out there as a thank you. And of course, there will be one there for Nana. Next slide. And with that, I will call for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a second.
Second.
All right. Thank you all. Our meeting is adjourned, and please stay safe out there. And we look forward to seeing you all this next year, and hopefully COVID will go away for us. Thank you very much. Enjoy your day.